The history and controversy of stem cells. So, just to start, we want to get a general education of what a stem cell is and the history of how we got to where we are now. Stem cells were first described in Toronto around 1961 by doctors James Till and Ernest McCulloch. These two people found that in mice bone marrow cells, they have the ability to turn into different type of cells or having pluripotency. These were then determined to be the first described stem cells because stem cells are widely known for being pluripotent and treated to turn into different kinds of cells. Now, in 1998, this is when we first saw the application of human embryonic stem cells being isolated by James Thompson. This is a huge moment because we're now moving from a small species like mice into full-grown humans, and we're also seeing this present in humans, meaning we can potentially manipulate the same pluripotency in humans and not just rodents. Something a lot more complex. Then we move into 2006, where we see the first reprogrammed adult somatic cells. So these are then turned into induced pluripotent stem cells using only 4 transcription factors rather than 24. So not only are we, finding and discovering that we can reprogram normal cells in humans into pluripotent stem cells, but we're also doing it in a much more efficient way and reducing the transcription factors and the time that we have to put into inducing these. This means that we're able to take more normal cells, changing their differentiation into non-differentiated cells, meaning we can turn them into skin, nerve, bones, muscles, liver, thyroids. We can change them and make them more useful. And it gives us a big, large supply that is nothing dealing with embryonic stem cells, meaning we don't have to have that discussion about whether, we have a life at conception or not. We get around those political and religious issues that have been barring, especially in the US, this stem cell research and progression. Now, we have 5 main types of stem cells that we know of right now. We have embryonic stem cells, very small embryonic-like stem cells, nuclear transfer reprogrammed stem cells, and adult stem cells. Now, the most used ones right now and the ones that show the most promise in a lot of the medical fields is going to be our embryonic stem cells and our induced pluripotent stem cells from the adult stem cells. But we have seen that only the nuclear transfer stem cells have been able to create a full organism. In 2018, they were able to create a full monkey in China using these stem cells. So we could see some potential application there. And then the importance of size is where we talk about the early 2000s, where we first start playing around with these stem cells. And the people who were anti-abortion were also anti-stem cell because they believed that it was tied in the same argument. The biggest point of contention was that embryo size. When are we, taking that embryo and taking the cells? Because in taking the embryonic stem cells, we do destroy the blastocyst, meaning it cannot go to term and become a human being. Now, pro stem cell research, the people who were proponents for this emphasized how small those pre-14-day embryos are, describing it as a tiny ball rather than, any terms of cells or children, adults, babies, nothing around the human discussion, keeping it general terms. And those who are against the stem cells will qualify it as being human despite having a lack of tying to abortion itself, considering a lot of these stem cells from embryos are taken from women who either cannot carry to term or who are infertile or who simply volunteer to give up their cells because they don't want to have children. They are actively going up to pregnant mothers and bullying them into donating embryonic stem cells. So I think there's a lack of general understanding of how it's how scientists are going about getting these embryonic stem cells. Now, the argument for stem cells is at this point, we don't really even need to be taking embryonic stem cells from human embryos anymore. A lot of these stem cells can be induced pluripotent, or we can just make them in vitro. Other points that we can take these stem cells from are going to be umbilical cords and umbilical cord blood. So we're finding even more sources outside of the embryo. So we won't even have to touch the blastocysts. Now, human embryonic stem cells were the first used in research applications and are actively being used today in research and hoping to be more widely used, especially in the US, depending on what political climate is currently in play. These stem cells are harvested 5 days post fertilization, maybe 4, and it does in turn destroy that blastocyst. Now, more and more sources, like I said on the previous slide, are being found that we can take these induced adult stem cells, or we can take umbilical cord stem cells from the tissue or the blood. These more sources are outside of reproduction, which means we can cut that middleman and cut out that argument entirely against stem cells, leaving a lack of a huge argument, the only argument that has really barred us from progressing in stem cell research in the US, mainly in the Bush term, saying he does not support killing babies. So this kind of rhetoric can no longer be used, as we don't even necessarily need to be taking any stem cells from the embryo. We can avoid that entirely and cut out that main argument against stem cells.